We're closing out this series called Shift, and it's been centered around this idea that if you make these subtle shifts in life, you can actually have lasting change. That's what everyone wants. So we've been kind of asking this question this year. I'm asking God to shift blank in my life. What is that thing in your life that you're like, this year, I really need God to do something in my life? It could be something with your faith. Maybe you're exploring, you're searching, you're wondering if God is real, you're going to follow him. It could be something financially, and you're saying, you're trying to get into a better place. It could be something with your health. It could be something within maybe your own family. Maybe you're praying for children. Whatever the case might be, you're asking for this thing, and you're asking God to maybe change your thoughts or your process, your mindset around it. Remember, we kind of said this and this idea that real change isn't behavior modification. Like these last few weeks, we're not trying to just give you tips to be a better person or to be a better human being, although our world could use better human beings. It's more than just being a better person, moral behavior modification. Real change comes from spiritual transformation. That if you want to experience actual change in your life, you need the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity. He is God. We need the Holy Spirit to change us, to do something in our life that only he can do, that no one else can do. And so it takes that movement from relying on ourselves to relying on God, because he's the only one that can actually bring about real change. It means nothing, though. All of this means nothing if there's no action. So the thought I want to kind of share with you today is that trying, and that's where most of us are at, right? It's the beginning of the year. Trying is all about effort. And we try to do all sorts of things. You've tried a diet already, right? You tried working out. You tried going to church. You tried to get on a budget. You tried to stop eating cake. You fill in the blank. You tried, and that's all about effort. But training is a little different because it's all about formation. It's all about who you're becoming. This is not about trying harder, right? So many times, especially maybe if you grew up in church, maybe you felt like this, like you just weren't trying hard enough. You weren't praying enough. You didn't go to church enough. You weren't giving enough. But it's always temporary. The harder you try, it seems like the harder it is to accomplish. And so what's the point of doing it anyways? We need training. We have to train. And we kind of said it a few weeks ago that when your identity is off, if you don't know who you are or how God sees you, then your direction is going to be off too. So you have to see yourself in the right way. You have to see yourself in the way that God sees you so that you can go the direction that he wants you to go. This is why people quit, because they don't see themselves in the way that God actually sees them. We see ourselves through the lens of how people see us, how we see ourselves, and that so many times is often through the filter of a false reality. So it's about emotion. Trying is all about emotion, right? How you feel in the moment. Trying is all about how you feel. It's all about your willpower. It's all about just trying to do it on your own. That's all what trying is. It's inconsistent, and sometimes it's just plain dumb luck. But training is intentional. When you're training for something, it's intentional, it's consistent, it's identity. There's a difference when you're training to do something and you're just a part of something. It's totally different. It's inconsistent. So Paul, he's talking to Timothy, and we're going to bring him up a couple of times today, kind of bookmark it, and then we'll look in 1 Corinthians. I think just a really powerful analogy that Paul shares. But Paul is training this young pastor named Timothy. And Timothy, as he was going through, he says it this way in 1 Timothy 4. He says to Timothy, don't waste time arguing over godless ideas and old wives' tales. So to give a little context, he's talking about false teachers, and there are so many false teachers, and they were just twisting the scriptures, twisting truth. And he said, Timothy, don't get caught up in just arguments that just waste your time, okay? He's like, and don't waste your time arguing over old wives' tales. Instead, listen to what he says, train yourself to be godly. Now that's unique, because he's saying godliness is not something you just fall into, but you can actually train yourself towards godliness. And listen to what he says in verse 8. He says physical training, he's like, that's good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. So that when we pursue godliness or pursue holiness, when we pursue a life that's actually set apart, what Paul says to Timothy is like, there are benefits, not only in this life where you live a blessed life, where God just does some things because you're following him, you're honoring him, you're living a life that's set apart. He's like, but remember, Timothy, this world is not our home. And you're gonna have some promising benefits. There's gonna be some eternal rewards for following the Lord in the next life that comes after this. So it's not about trying harder, it's about training. And if you and I can understand that as followers of Christ, for those of us who have a relationship with him, if we started training towards what we wanted to do, you're gonna experience more victories. Some of you have been praying for certain stuff. You wanna grow in your faith, you wanna pray more, you wanna get better in your marriage, or whatever the case is, you fill in the blank. You're just gonna try harder. And then guess what? You've tried that before and you're just gonna end up stopping. It's just not gonna work. And you'll say, see, I tried and it didn't work. I did that and then this happened. But training is something very different. Paul taught that to the Corinthian church. And I just, every so often, I know I brought it up today, this is totally off subject. Can we just, I'm a little ADD here in a moment, but a couple years ago, I wanted to buy an NLT Bible. So I did, a physical copy. And there was two versions, the exact same, but one was $3 less. And I'm like, of course, I'm gonna buy that for $3 less. I didn't realize they were gonna put a golden hockey skate on the front of it, all right? And so now every time I see this Bible, I giggle a little bit. So when you see me open the Bible, it's not because I think it's funny, it's because I'm looking at that, I'm looking at this ice skate, and I'm just laughing that I'm supporting hockey players all across the world today. So, all right, we're in 1 Corinthians 9. Get back on track, all right? 1 Corinthians 9, he's talking to the Corinthian people, and he's gonna share some verses that I think is really interesting. We'll read through it, and then we'll come back through and talk about what's happening. Paul says this, don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Now, Paul uses an analogy that the people there in Corinth understood very well. They lived on the isthmus. All right, so if you kind of go over that area, it's an isthmus that connected Greek to Peloponnese, all right? So they lived in the isthmus. Now, every 2 years after the Olympics, there would be the Isthmian Games. You could go back in history and you can find out about this. So the Isthmian Games were a religious festival to the Greek god Poseidon. Obviously, we know this is, he's not a real god, but that's what they thought. He was the god of the ocean, right? He was the god of the waters and the seas. And so this was this thing. And so every 2 years in between the Olympics, they were having this huge games, these Olympic games. It's kind of very similar to Barbarian Challenge up there on Nakalula Falls. Not that it's a race for the Greek god Poseidon, but that every single year, crazy people get together. They do this obstacle course race, and I love it. I signed up, and you should sign up too, all right? Let's be crazy together. But in this Isthmian Games, in the Olympics, this is what they would compete. The men would compete in different games. Here are some of the games they compete in. They would compete in foot races. They would compete in wrestling. They would compete in boxing. They would compete in something called pankration, which is like a MMA style fighting. So they competed in all these different things. They had chariot races. They had horse races. And they actually even had a musical competition and poetry competitions. It was the original 8 Mile. You know what I'm saying? It was going down. Only some of you get that, but that's all the ones that need to get it, all right? And so it was like that. It was just going back and forth, truly incredible. Now, in verse 24, Paul says it, and let's read what he's saying so you kind of understand they get what he's talking about. He said, don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize, so run to win. That makes sense. In a race, only one person could be first place. Ricky Bobby said, if you're not first, you're last, right? So only one person can win. And so if you're gonna run the race, run to actually win. Who signs up for a competition, Paul is saying, and they're like, you know what? I don't even wanna win. I just want to run. I just want to try my hardest, right? No, you're running to actually win. There can only be one winner. That's why Denver, oh, that's right. No, we're out. All right, so never mind. Only one person could win. All right, so he's saying, listen, we're running our own race. You and I have our own races that we're running in our life. You have your own race that you're running. I have a race that I'm running. Every single person has a race that they're running. And so if we're running a race, why don't you run to actually win? So we'll look at 3 thoughts this morning. Winning takes training. If you want to win in your life, you actually have to train. Okay, you're not just gonna accidentally win. You're not just gonna accidentally get godly, or you're not accidentally just gonna have a healthy bank account, or you're not just gonna accidentally get out of debt, or accidentally get healthy, or whatever you fill in the blank. None of those things will accidentally happen. You actually have to be intentional, which takes training. Verse 25, Paul says it this way: all athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So he says, so we discipline our body like an athlete. Now, we're talking about the Isthmian Games, and it was very unique, all right, in that culture versus our culture today. You're talking about a couple thousand years ago. If you were going to be a part of these games, you had to submit yourself to some very intense training, discipline, commitment. As a matter of fact, it would take 10 months of just personal commitment of I'm training for these games, and you had to have it documented, all right? So it'd be like the equivalent of vlogging yourself every single day so everyone knows. Like you're getting on TikTok like, hey guys, I'm about to eat here today because everyone cares what I'm about to eat and everyone cares what I'm going to try at McDonald's today and you should try it too. And you watch someone eat their food. That's kind of like the same thing, except they're documenting their training. And then the last month of their training, it was done on site where the games were held, and a judge would actually supervise them to make sure they were doing all of the work they said they were going to do. Now, they had to have a high protein, high carb diet. There was no wine, no snacking, no sex. And here's the craziest part. All of the training was done completely in the nude. You look this up yourself. I mean, just, have your safe settings set. But this is what was happening. As a matter of fact, gymnasium comes from the Greek word gymnos, which means naked. So think about that next time you're going to the gym, all right? You're like, that's strange, right? So that's what's going on there. Now, here's a big caveat. Because they were bearing it all, there were no women allowed to compete in these games. This was considered military training. So even though they were, winning for prizes, going for prizes, this was military training, and it was culturally unacceptable for women to be a part of these games because they were showing everything. This also explains why women are smarter than men. All right, that's just another example of how we can see that. But the Greeks, they idolized the human body. You see the old sculptures and things like that. They idolized the human body. And so when you were doing these games completely exposed to the entire world, it showed everything about your body, and it showed the imperfections and everything. You could hide nothing. And so what Paul is saying is when you are doing these races and compete to win, train with purpose, have a goal in mind. Don't just do this for nothing. So many people just live their whole life and they've wandered the entire time. There was never purpose or intentionality behind what they were actually doing. They're just living and breathing, eating and having life, but they don't even know what they're supposed to do. So spiritual victory doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from training wiser. How are you training? What is your purpose? Where are you going? When Jesus called, he says, follow me. He didn't say, hey, try to follow me. He says, no, you follow me. He doesn't say, hey, try praying more, try giving more, try to stop yelling, try to start caring, try to not be a jerk. He doesn't say any of those things. Training says, I have a plan. This is what I intend to do. Here's the direction that I'm going. I'm becoming someone. I am getting help. Here are the steps that I'm taking. So you don't rise to the level of your goals. You're going to fall to the level of your training. You see that? You're not going to just become what your goals are. Some of us have some lofty goals. And then remember some of these goals you set in high school, maybe in college. Now look at your life and you're like, yeah, I had none of those goals, right? Like we didn't hit any of those things. You're going to fall to the level of your training because training is the bridge between change and winning. If you really want to experience victory in your life, you have to start training yourself to experience victory in your life. So you train because you are going to fail, but you're going to start noticing the changes in your life because you are training. When I talk about Aaron and I taking 10 years to get out of debt, that was intentionality of sacrificing lots of things, sacrificing going on vacation because, hey, we have to take care of this aspect of our life. But now we are on the other side of it and we can go, hey, there are things we get to do today because we said no to ourselves then. And so you're intentional in what you're doing. Hey, I'm trying to grow in my faith, so there are some steps I'm gonna take so I can grow in my faith. And then when you start to see victory in your faith, you don't have to be surprised because you were training to do that all along. The second thought is this: winning isn't perfection, it's progress. Winning is progress, all right? So listen, it says in verse 26, he said, so I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I love that. He says, like, shadow boxing is great because you're like preparing to fight, but you're just boxing and you're hitting no one. You're hitting nothing. You're just boxing after your shadow. He says the real victory comes in the actual fight, when you have another person standing in front of you, when you have a real enemy, when you have a real target. That's where all your training comes into play. You're not just going through the motions. He says we have this eternal prize that we're fighting for. You ever seen someone like when they try to fight, like you see those videos, like you're scrolling, you see the videos, people just throwing haymakers. You're like, that's how you know they have no idea what they're doing. They're just swinging, hoping something connects, right? Paul's saying you don't have to live life swinging haymakers. You can actually have purpose. You can have victory and you can win. You can beat your enemy. Your life has intention, direction. We're going with purpose. We know where we're headed. We've got our eyes on Christ. We're following him. We know where we're going. Most of us try, we fail. Training is different. Shadow boxing is movement with no impact, is what Paul is saying. We train to hit a real target, a real enemy. We're taking something out. We're going with purpose. We have a strategy. You have to have a strategy. So what does winning look like? What does that mean? So some of us need to quit shadow boxing in our marriages. Hey, you think you're making things better, but you're really making no progress at all. Have some intentionality behind it. Maybe call the counselor. Maybe start to go on dates. Maybe, start having meaningful conversations. Quit just being roommates, this kind of thing. Maybe when it comes to your finances, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have strategy. We're gonna live on a budget. We're not going out to eat this week. Hey, we're not gonna do this thing this week. We are gonna cancel these subscriptions or whatever the case might be. Hey, I care about my health, and so that means we gotta start eating a little bit differently. And so we're gonna make some choices because we wanna be healthy, or we're gonna go to the gym and we're gonna go twice a week and here's how we're going to start, or whatever the case might be. Have some purpose when it comes to your faith. Quit just saying, well, I'm going to try to go to church. I'll try to read my Bible. No, I'm having purpose, intentionality. I'm going to start this Bible reading plan. I'm going to get connected into a life group. I want to step outside of my comfort zone and connect with other people. And you might just find as you take these steps that God begins to work in your life because you are starting to train your body. Winning looks like what? I want to be more obedient than I was last year. I want to say yes to God more than I say no to God. Maybe winning looks like, all right, I'm going to start to be generous with my giving instead of waiting to see if I have anything left over. I'm going to have more self-control than I did yesterday. I want to just be consistent, and you start putting in that hard work. So we say it like this: winners aren't flawless, winners are formed. So in your life, it's not that you're going to be flawless because we're human beings, but you can be formed. Winners are formed. And as you continue training in your life, when we're disciplining our body, that's hard work. What I'm talking about is hard work. Paul says, I've disciplined myself to be a certain way. I'm not just who I am anymore. I shared this, it's been 2 or 3 months ago. We were talking about selfishness, and literally in the moment of speaking the message, it was first service, it was during this service, I realized mid-message that I was very selfish in letting my wife wake up and take care of the kids and get them ready for school, and all I did was just wake up and take them to school, all right? I felt convicted about that mid-message. So I've been making these changes with intentionality. Now I'm waking up, I'm helping them, I'm making breakfast, I'm helping get their lunch ready. And then I'm also taking them to school. So it took discipline, training, intentionality, but now like it's just this thing that I'm also doing, right? So that's what we're talking about. You're forming into something. You're becoming, you're pursuing this thing in your life. And that really stinks, right? It's tough. Because like the days where I'm just up late and I'm just reading or whatever the case at night, just, watching the next Marvel show or whatever, and I go to bed late, it makes the next day a lot harder. Undisciplined. And so what Paul's saying is I discipline myself because there's a purpose and a goal I have in mind, and that's what I want to do. And I don't get there by accident. I get there on purpose. So when I do the thing I want to do, it's because I worked for it. I trained myself, which brings us to this third idea. Winning requires staying in the fight. You have to stay in the fight. Verse 27, he says, I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. So Paul, he gives this warning here. He says, when you start training, you will start seeing victories. That's what I want you to understand. This is the idea we talked about in this series, reaping and sowing. Whatever you put into life, you're going to get that out. So when you start doing these things, when you start training, you will experience victories. You will see God begin to do some things in your life because you've been training for it. But what he says is when you start winning, be careful because it's a trap. Winning becomes a trap. When you start having success in your life, it then becomes a trap to you. And so what Paul says is, don't stop doing what got you there in the first place. Sometimes we feel like, we can coast. It's very simple examples like going to the gym. Being 42 and going to the gym, that's great. I feel like I can get to a spot, I can lift certain weights, I can do certain things, I feel good. But if I just take 1 week off, which is stupid, I can't do what I just did. It loses it a little bit. You lose a little bit. Or if you stop going to the gym, you're like, I'm just going to come back and do what I did before. It doesn't work like that. You can't just coast. You can't just say, well, I accomplished this thing and now I don't have to work anymore. He's saying, no. You got to keep doing what got you there. You can't just stop. You have to keep doing it because otherwise it becomes a trap. Be careful to not let that thing conquer you. You conquered it, but now that thing can take you out. You can get healthy financially. You can go, man, look at all this money we have. And you can wind right back up in the very spot you tried to free yourself from in the first place. So we're saying this, winning makes you vulnerable if you stop training. I want you to experience victory in your life. I feel like I've experienced lots of victories in my life. But at the same time, you will be very vulnerable to the enemy when you stop training. And that's what Paul's saying here. He's saying, listen, I don't want to lose everything I have, disqualify myself because I stopped training and disciplining my body. He says, disciplining my mind, following the Lord. He's not talking about losing his salvation. And I always need to point that out. Depending on your church background, when you put your faith and trust in Jesus, you're not going to lose that, okay? What kind of God says, I'm going to save you, but when you screw up, I take it away, and you have to get saved again? That's not salvation. Salvation is a gift that God gives you, and what you do with that gift is now up to you. You want to live in the blessing of God or you not want to, but the moment you put your faith and trust in Christ, you have that forever. And I think that's truly amazing. What Paul's talking about here is God's given me a calling, and he says, and if I screw up, I can disqualify myself from doing the very thing that I'm doing right now. I mean, I think you see it all the time. It's almost like month after month, you just hear about some other pastor or some big name guy that made some decision, made some choice, something came out, and what happens? They disqualify themselves from being in what they're supposed to do. Paul's talking about, I don't want to lose my witness. I don't want to lose the platform that I've used to build. I don't want to lose my ability to lead others. It says, I've got to be careful. I don't want to undo everything because of one stupid choice. I think any one of us are in that same position that we could lose something that we've built up because we've let our guard down. I love what Susanna Wesley says. She's actually the mother of John Wesley, just powerful Christian you can read about through church history. And she said this: whatever increases the strength and authority of your body over your mind, that thing is sin to you. Now think about that for a second. If there's something in your life that you allow to control you over your following of Christ, she says that thing is sin. She says you got to get rid of it. You don't need that thing in your life. She says we let our guard down, right? We as people, we let our guard down. We feel like we're doing good. Hey, life is going great right now for you. You don't have to worry about anything. You're like, I have no struggles. I have no trials. Things are great. Like I followed God. My faith is good. And all these things are great. And so you feel like you can just start coasting. And Paul says, watch out, because the next thing you know, you let your guard down. The enemy comes in. He knows how to steal, kill, and destroy. And he'll sweep your legs out from under you. And you will be in a place you never thought you would be. The Corinthians knew this. They knew that the worst thing for any athlete were to be in a race, win, compete, and win that race, but then be disqualified because you cheated, because you were dishonest, because you broke the rules, because you brought shame to the games in some type of way. That was the worst thing that could happen to anybody, was to be disqualified. Paul says, I don't want to finish first in life, but I've actually lost when it comes to eternal life. I don't want to lose. I don't want to cheat in my private life. He says, I want to have a strong life. I don't want to be scared to lose the race because I know that I'm cheating the games. Don't just coast to victories. Don't just coast and think that you've got it all figured out. You train yourself, you start experiencing victory, but then when you're there, you continue to discipline yourself, keeping your eyes on Christ, growing in your walk with Him. Don't lose sight, or you can lose everything that you've built up. The enemy doesn't just attack you when you're weak, he attacks you when you're strong, when you feel like you don't have a flaw. I love Paul in 1 Timothy 4 tells Timothy to train. And now in 2 Timothy 4, Paul's at the end of his life. He's truly about to be executed for his faith. And he says this to Timothy, and I think this is powerful. And this is my prayer, and I hope that it's yours as well. He says, I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race, and I have remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his appearing. Paul said, I stayed in the fight all 12 rounds. And there were times where I got knocked down. He said, but I got right back up. And he says, and any Christ follower can have the same thing. You stay in the fight. You train your body. You train your mind. You pursue Christ. You start experiencing victories. And that is the subtle shift in our life to make lasting change, is to start training. And for some of you, if you actually get a plan in your life and say, I'm actually gonna have intentionality. I'm not just gonna show up to church. There's intentionality behind what I'm doing when it comes to my faith. There's intentionality when it comes to growing in relationship with others, to changing my finances, to changing my health, to changing my faith, to changing my marriage, to changing, you fill in the blank. There's intentionality and training. And as you start training, you start seeing victory. And then when you start seeing victory, you keep training so you can see more victories and the enemy won't take you out. That is the small shift for life-changing transformation. Let's pray.